I had been in New York, and I had been doing little things here and there, and some showcases. And I recall that I was hired by a guy who was doing a short film on violence, and he hired me and another actor, myself and another actor, to have a fist fight in a field. And he wanted to see how we handled that, and would we do it? And he was going to pay us $30 a piece. Looking back on that, I said, $30, you bet. And so this guy and I met, and we secretly went off to Central Park and rehearsed the entire fight scene. And then we were off in Jersey somewhere in some forest, having a fist fight that wasn't real. Probably looked very bad, and neither one of us got hurt. And we apologized to the fellow, and he says, "That's okay. That's how you guys handle it." I recall that incident. Those kinds of things happening. I was working as a waiter at Daly's Dandelion, which was Skitch Henderson's restaurant. Skitch Henderson was the music director for Johnny Carson. And New York was all very, 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 very new to me, very exciting. I was working at a place called the American Place Theater. Dan Adea was a buddy of mine. We were working together in that thing. We were taking acting classes. At that time, I had an agent, and Michael Hartig, I think was his name. And I believe Michael set up the audition. And the audition, I walked in. I recall being relatively nervous with a whole bunch of people. And I remember it went rather well. I think Dan right there said, yeah. And I went, wow, great. Terror was my experience. I'd never done a soap opera. I had done episodic television under contract at Universal. I was relatively stiff. And I was always concerned about forgetting lines. It's taken me probably, like Paul Newman, maybe 30 years to understand how to answer a telephone, somewhat believably. So I got the job and I got the script, and I didn't know the format where you would go in the night, you'd do the show, the next day you'd rehearse that night, you'd walk through it, you'd come in, you'd have some stuff go on in the morning, and then you were going to shoot this thing. And so I got a tape recorder, and I would tape both sides of not my conversation, but I would take the dialogue from my responsive dialogue and my cues, and I would tape it, and so that I could, because I didn't really have anybody to work with particularly. And I'd sit in my little apartment over on the east side, and I would play the the microphone, the tape out as to, all right, you get in there, there's some Leviathans. And then I would say, oh, there are Leviathans? Well, they can't touch me because I'm Skylar Robson or whatever. And I would do my dialogue, and I would do this with myself, which never worked. When I got there, I was convinced, my biggest fear was that I would forget my lines, and this was live. The one time that I did that, and I was doing a play here, I was in Here Comes Mr. Jordan. And we were in the Off-Broadway Theater in Long Beach. I left that on my resume as just Off-Broadway. I forgot my lines in the middle of that, and everybody's eyeballs perked up, and I started just swearing. I started four-letter epithets, and this guy looked at me, and he sort of filled in for me. That was one of my first sort of experiences in theater, and I never got over it. To this day, I'm much better at it. Now I can get 20 pages down and spit it out, but I just spit it out. I understand a little bit better. So I had a difficult time relaxing on the set. That was my main memory. And by the time they finished putting the pancake makeup on me to the degree that I looked like a mummy, and started walking through the process, it was a real eye opener. I enjoyed watching Selby and Laura. They were very good at what they did. And I've forgotten the name of the gal that But there were some very, very, very fluid people in there. Yeah, Grayson was just. Well, she was wonderful. She was just sort of Mother Earth and just body and direct and very comfortable. And I felt pretty relaxed around her, and I enjoyed working with her. But I never really hit my stride there. They got me out of there before my stride hit it. But I had some fun times. I remember Laura. We were doing a play off Broadway, way off Broadway at the Sheridan Square Theater, rehearsing with her. I remember. My career, I've been bitten, turned into a Leviathan. I've had my heart replaced on General Hospital, put into Mrs. Quartermain's body, which I refused to attend. And they weren't real pleased with me, but I said, it's not going to happen unless you pay me. My contract is over. They got very furious with me, but I wouldn't do it. It cost me a fair amount of money, but I just didn't want to be around that particular production. And so they hired a guy that was a foot shorter than me, and they took his heart out and put it in Mrs. Quartermain's. Well, we just plowed on. We could occasionally stop. We didn't reshoot that I recall. I very frankly now, I'm going to be blunt, my wife will kill me, but basically I thought my whole charade was one big blooper. For me, it was a constant struggle. And to sort of... To hit a stride, and I looked at some of the old stuff. It was okay. It was all right. But I was so dedicated to getting those lines memorized and not forgetting them that all else went out the window. All intent, thought, emotional life. It was getting the word said. This may not be the audition tape that you're interested in, but that's what transpired. As to some of the people, it was a very interesting experience, and I was saddened that Schuyler's character didn't continue on, but it was a good learning experience.